Are you ready to save our kids? If children are the living messages that we send to a time that we will not see, Save Our Kids is an opportunity for you to be introduced to a few school and student helpers that will support each child's individual journey. If there is a space or a place to improve the lives of our children, we know a few families and business owners who have made it their business to answer the call for help and provide a solution to those quietly discussed challenges that impact our children and eventually us all. We could not just choose one kiddo to save, so we are asking for your help to reach more. Join Keeping Your Kids Safe as we identify some of the problems and share a few solutions that have been created just for you. Hello, hello. I am back. Oh man, I'm going to break something over here. Never fails. Hello, friends. Hello, Jean. How are you today? Forget it.
I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing good. It's Tuesday, and we're trying. And as long as we're making an impact, we're doing all the right things. That's kind of how I see it.
Agreed.
All right. It's nice to see you here, and I'm glad that you decided to come back and hang out with me. I think this time it's going to be a little different, which is the intent here is to really dig into what you're doing, why you're doing it, and then some of the things that have changed since we spoken last, and what can parents do, or teachers and everyone do to kind of help negate and support those families who may be going through some of these challenges. What do you think? Okay. So as normal, I don't think I'm going to spotlight myself today. I'm just going to hang out here. We got some people that are going to join us here shortly, not on stage, but in the audience. All right. So what do I say? All right. We know we have a lot of children that go to school every year, but this is what we know. 1 out of 5 kids are bullied in school. That means 5.4 million children skip school every day due to bullying. 9 out of 10 are LGBT students experiencing harassment at school. 60% of boys who are bullied in middle school had at least one criminal conviction by age 24. That means that some of this stuff can be solved elsewhere before it escalates. Victims of bullying can experience afraid to go to school, afraid to ride the school bus, using the bathrooms. Come on, using the bathrooms, being alone in a school hallway. And so because, Jean, you're here and we know what you do and you're going to share a little bit about it, let me set a little bit of the context. What we've learned is I went and looked up the stats, wanted to make sure that I was talking from fresh numbers and not old numbers. And what I've discovered that already by we have 46 school shootings that have happened this year in 2024. This trend almost looks like we may get close to the 82 school shootings that we had last year. So this is escalating. This is getting worse, even though we think it's supposed to get better. So since 2008, we had 18 school shootings. We're in 2024, and we're not finished with this year, and we're now at 46. One of the last shootings only thankfully claimed the life of 4. But that doesn't mean that we should ignore it because the number was small. It means that we should be more alert. I'm going to say some things that probably are going to upset some people, and that's okay. It's okay to be upset because then we know you feel. 1, it's not the guns. It has nothing to do with the guns. Stop attacking these gun manufacturers. Stop attacking people who want to carry a gun for protection. It is not the guns. The number one reason I see this happening is because children are making a choice because they feel as though it's the only choice they have to make. They're choosing to pick up a gun and take the life of someone else who may be harming them, doing something to them, and things that are not okay. But that is the problem. It's not the gun. It's the choice. It's the selection of how to get rid of the problem that they're facing at the time. And so this is a conversation I've wanted to have for probably a year, almost a year. And this last incident was said I was on a hunt looking. So I came back to Eugene and I was like, hey, can we have this conversation? And you were grateful enough to say yes. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight you. Please share with everyone what you do and what you're up to, and then we can go take it from there. So wait, I can do this thing that's going to do that. Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Gene Petrino. I'm the co-founder of Survival Response. We started off our company as an active shooter response company, and over the course of the thousands that we've taught, we realized that there was something nagging us. There was a problem, and the problem is that the focus had always been on what to do when it happens, and that seems backwards to us. Our philosophy is, why aren't we teaching people how to prevent these from happening? Because believe it or not, almost every single one of these is preventable. And I say almost every one because nothing is 100%. But every single shooter, whether it's in a school or a business or a religious location, it doesn't matter. They all go through the same pathway of violence. And if we start teaching people what to look for and how to address it up front, you can stop these from happening. And we're seeing it all the time. Right now, I know you're talking about the stats of where we're at this year, but over the last 2 years, we're down 22% roughly in these shootings. So why is that happening? What's changed? And my belief is that people are now starting to understand that we need to start focusing more on threat assessments and how you're identifying someone who could be a shooter, addressing them early on in that intervention process to pull them off that pathway to violence, so they don't do the attack. And it's a difficult thing to do, because when these shootings happen, it's a very emotional thing. It's very upsetting. It's sad. It's horrific. It's terrible. And when our emotions start making decisions for us, we start focusing on where to blame things. Like you're talking about guns, everyone's like, it's the guns. Well, it happens in other countries with knives. It happens with people. It's a tool. They're going to take out their anger and their issues with a tool. And if they have a gun, they're going to use a gun. If they don't, they're going to use a knife. If they don't have a knife, they're going to use a bat. They're going to use a car. They're going to find a way to inflict the pain that they want to meet their need to address what they're going through. So that's essentially what we're really focusing on, is how to teach people. We call it situational awareness, how to identify threat indicators early on in the process so that we take them off that pathway to violence and they can get help, and it saves lives. And I think that's really why we're seeing a decrease in these incidents, even though it seems like there's a lot, and there's still, one is too many, honestly, but we are seeing a decrease. And for me, that's a hopeful sign. It's not an answer yet. We're still not there. We have a long way to go, but we're getting there.
I'm glad you're here. So we're going to go into this conversation because you're right. I feel like everybody wants to place blame, but ultimately the blame is actually all of ours. It's all of us. It's not 100%. One group of people or another. It is every single one of us, because we make decisions and we do things and say things, and our children are watching us, and then what do we do to help support them? What do we do to help improve how they do things or what's happening next? Children should never be in a position to feel as though this is my only option. That my only option is to kill this person so the noise can stop. You think a lot of people are under the impression that kids want to say, I just want to kill you just because I want to kill you. It's not that. It's, I want the pain to stop. I want to stop feeling tortured in my brain and on my body, mentally. And a lot of the stuff that we can do can help provide them skills to do that. So let's go back to so I do see a trend. I did see it kind of starting to trend downward. Mm-hmm. So people are starting to pay more attention. I think it's unfortunate that it took so many lives to be taken. And I do believe, I'm going to say, Uvalde was the pivot point. I think Uvalde was that pivot point.
You might be right. I don't know. I don't know where the pivot point was, but you could be right. You could be. That was, another one. It's sad because every time I look at these, I'm like, I say the same things. What did we know before it happened? And there's so much information that comes out. I think missed these opportunities or downplayed the opportunities. You mentioned bullying. So I don't remember the exact stat, but it's nearly 65% or so of school shooters were
Yes.
bullied.
Yep.
So
60%.
here's been my experience, and in speaking with other people in law enforcement, we all see kind of the same thing, is that schools don't like to address bullying um, too much because it shines a bad light on a problem. And so a lot of times schools for many reasons will downplay situations because they don't want to have that negative view of them. And it could even come down to they don't want to have crimes reported. They don't want to have a lot of stuff happen because it could affect their funding. It could affect their reputation. There's so many problems that it creates that, and they don't know what to do. So they'd rather just sort of downplay it and make it go away. And that's a huge issue. Now they're not the only problem. I'm not blaming schools entirely, because you are so right when you say it's everybody, because law enforcement has had many failures. The judicial system, there's everybody. It is always a group dynamic. Anytime there's a problem, there's usually never one single issue. It's usually a culmination of a lot of topics that came in at once that created this problem. And to downplay bullying um, is a huge mistake. And the other thing that I think is that you know every life is bullying. You're going to be bullied in life as an adult. You're going to be bullied. So it's not that you have to. You're not going to stop bullying. Bullying's always going to happen, but we need to start teaching kids how to cope with being bullied, how to understand the dynamics of it, because life is not always pleasant. People aren't always going to be friendly. You're going to have bosses or coworkers that you don't get along with, people in the streets, and you might have a run-in with somebody at a restaurant. It's life itself. And if you don't learn these skills early on, you're going to have a big problem. And I think that we're seeing that breakdown in schools right now, where it's being downplayed. So here's a scenario. You've got a kid being bullied. They report it to a teacher. The teacher in the school downplay it to be nothing, and that kid feels like they're not being heard. They feel like they're not being represented. They're not being cared for, and so that starts what's called the grievance stage. When we're talking about the pathway to violence, it's a stepping stone. It starts with a grievance. They feel like they've been wronged. And so you're only strengthening that grievance when a school doesn't address that in the relative way that needs to be addressed with. I'm not saying kids have to be expelled for it, but that you have to be able to intervene at that point. So when the school downplays it, you're building that grievance. So this kid is going to feel like nobody cares, no one's listening to me. And that's just going to they're going to ruminate on that. It's going to be stuck in their head. And then they start thinking, man, I'd like to get back at them. And they get to that next level, which is the violent ideation. And they think, wow, I would love just to beat them up. I hit them. And then it starts getting more violent. And they go to the next step. Well, how would I do that? And they start thinking, well, I could do this, and they start researching online, school shootings. And this is where this all starts. It's a pathway.
Wow.
We know where this is at. We know how they're doing this. And every single shooter, every single one of them has done what's called leakage. They're leaking the information out, and no one's paying attention to it. They'll say things like, they'll praise a school shooter, let's say. They might say, oh, I understand why they did that. It's a weird thing for someone to say. They might do things that are maybe not so obvious, but they might be a good student that all of a sudden is more absenteeism. They're not as social. They're kind of sitting by themselves now. They're withdrawing. They're getting angrier. Their behavior, all these behavioral changes we have to start paying attention to, because that's the beginning of this grievance stage. And that's a kid that doesn't know how to handle the stress of school and of life. And if we don't intervene at that very point, we are going to have a problem, and they're going to keep going up that pathway until the attack comes. And then everyone says, why didn't anyone do anything? Well, we all could have done something. Like you said, everyone had these opportunities to get involved, and we missed those chances.
I agree. So let's talk about a little bit of that. So one is, you're absolutely right, but I don't agree that we should be used to bullying. I think that the bullies need to be put in a corner and chastised, because now I'm talking about students. I'm talking about these doggone adults. The biggest lie ever told to any child is, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I think that is the largest lie that has been perpetuated generation after generation. That is not true. Stop using it. Words are like cream of wheat or grits, whichever one you like, right? They stick to your skin and continue to burn until, right? And even when you think you got it all off, there's these little tiny grains that stick to you. That's what words do. So stop saying that these words don't hurt. They do. They're extremely painful. But to accept bullying is not acceptable. It should not be normalized, period. I did not agree because when I was growing up, they said, and I hate going back there because it's not that. But the point I'm trying to make here is that we have all been bullied. I used to get jumped. They used to come after me and attempt to jump me. And I remember having to fight a group, they all was, but I had to just grab a hold of one of them and just commence to get in the business, right? But the point is that I followed the hierarchy of what I was told to do, and no one did anything. It's okay, just ignore them. It's okay, we will take care of it once they do it. It's never, hey, if you continue this, there are consequences on the other side of that, and that's not going to be a fight on the courtyard. It's going to be you home with your parents, but that's not what's happening. And so if that happened to me when I was younger, what's happening now? Now it's totally different and it's worse. So we are making the shooters infamous in their own space because they got the respect because they had to kill people. But that is history. History has taught us that how people get things is through brute force. So most things that are acquired are done through brute force when the thing is bigger than the person, right? And if children are watching that, that's what they see. So they're going to emulate that. When schools take social emotional learning out of the school curriculum, it actually helps. They have actually created a petri dish allowing for these things to ruminate and continue to grow and fester into something that's bigger. But the one thing that I know that some people have asked in the past is there is definitely a difference in who is doing these shootings and who is not. So when you look at Statista, it says 82 of the shooters were white males. Mm-hmm. Only 26 were Black. So we, as community members, and I say this, we are all responsible for this. You've seen that kid when he's walking with a trench coat. You've seen when he was in the store buying bullets. You've seen when he was doing things you knew he wasn't supposed to be doing. You've seen it when he was practicing shooting, right? And you never raised the hand and said, hey, something else might be going on. I get the strong sense that something's wrong, right? So the community is sitting by and saying, shame on you. You should have done something. But hang on. Shame on you. You should have done something first because you've seen it first. So when I talk about school being parent, home being parent one, school being parent two, and the bonus parent being the community, this is what I'm talking about. Because parents are being pulled away to go to work more hours than they did when we were younger. So that means that child has more freedom to do other things. And now they have the ability to speak to other friends who have the same doggone problem, who says, what can we do to get them back? And they have no adult to stop that noise, right? So we got to get better at that. But the one question is, in all of the leakage, why does it seem that it's more white males or more white people who actually go for the shooting versus the other races?
Well, before I answer that or give my opinion on that, I do want to just clarify a little bit. I wasn't saying that it's okay to be a bully. I wasn't that. If that came across that way, No. It's not okay. It has to be addressed. What I'm saying is that there's always good and there's always gonna be bad, and that's sort of, we have to realize that it's going to happen. It has to be addressed, and I agree with you that words are what do they say, the pen is mightier than the sword. I totally believe that, because you can inflict a lot more damage with your words than anything else, especially to a young mind that's still developing and they don't understand their emotions and how things work. I think it's really critical. And the other aspect of that is it's like you were saying, you were bullied. We were all bullied. Everyone gets bullied. The difference now is we have social media. So you're not just being bullied in a private setting, you're being bullied in a global setting because everyone's got access to the internet. Everyone can see this, and people jump on that don't even know you, and it's like just pouring fuel on the fire. So that's a real issue. When it comes to the race, I don't have a reason for it. I really don't know the reason. But I think that I honestly think as a society, we have lost a lot of morality. And I think that we have, you know, you can call it religion or God. I call it morality. I think that we've lost the ability to see right from wrong, and to step in and say, hey, stop, this is not right. You have to not do this. I think a lot of people would rather just look away and not get involved. And like you're saying, that community side of things is huge. It's a huge part of it. Every single aspect of these shootings, there were so many chances that someone could have done something. And it's interesting. They did a study, I think in 2018 or 17, on the see something, say something phrase. Does it work? And they found that it doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because people don't know what they're looking for. And when they see something, they don't know who to say, who they should tell, and if it's something they really should say it or not. It's a confusing thing. It's a great catchphrase, but to most people, they don't know what they're looking for. They don't know who to tell. And you know, we also get to that point where, you know, a kid's afraid to tell their parents what happens in school. So to me, that's a parenting problem. Your kid should always feel safe to talk to you. They should, even when they do wrong, they should feel that you are the one that's supposed to be there for them to be safe. And I don't think that's always the case. I really don't think that's the case. A lot of times, like you said, I think the reason for that really is somewhat economics, where they're working multiple jobs. They're not always home. They're tired. You know, life is a lot harder than it was 20 or 30, 40 years ago. Some ways it's easier. Some ways it's much harder. And I think it's harder for a child right now than it was probably for us. But I think that we have to start focusing on, you know, these stats are great. They're really good. I think that the whole idea of identifying what stats we're looking for, like it's white males, I think that's great. I don't know. I almost don't even care what the reason is, but I use that as a clue for, okay, so if we're looking at a kid who's a young white male that's getting bullied in school and their behavior starts changing. So now we've got two white male. Okay, there's one mark against them. Then there's an issue where their grades are they're starting to skip school. They're starting to lash out. We need to, that's something we need to start looking at. We need to start looking at behaviors of these kids really a lot. And to get into the race and all that, I don't know if that's necessary or not, and I could be wrong. My whole thing is, it's a clue. It's something that just puts them at a level that's higher statistically. For whatever reason, they're more likely to do that. So if it was a black female child who's getting bullied and a black male or a white male, the white male is probably going to be the more likely person. So we need to make sure, especially when we see these bullying or complaints from these people, we need to address it, but it has to be addressed. We have to start getting involved. And I've spoken to a lot of teachers, and they agree that they will bring the complaints up of bullying, and for administrative reasons, it's pushed down to be, we'll just let it happen and we'll talk to the kids, we'll talk to the parents. Sometimes the parents aren't even notified, which is another huge issue, because while a lot of times these days parents don't want to believe their kids could be bad, you know, they need to be notified, you know, because there's a lot of times where not my kid. Well, I've got him on video doing this, but still not him. It's not that much, but it's on video. They've been not my kid.
Can't be them. You were mistaken.
They would never. He would never do it. But this is what I'm saying is that you're going to have those failures, but if there's all failures, it's never going to get addressed. So if the school doesn't quite take it seriously, but the parents know about it, the parents start getting involved, and maybe get law enforcement involved, or make noise to the school boards, make noise to get these things addressed, because it is so serious and yet so simple to address early on. If you start to see the changes, get involved, and I really do think there's a lot of schools that are embracing the whole threat assessment process, and they're getting involved. And if it's interesting, if you start looking at the number, if you just Google, like, you know, school shooter stopped or whatever, you'll see so many kids that are being arrested before they commit attack because their threats are being made. So this is why I'm like, okay, we're getting there. We're starting to get some traction of where we need to be. People are seeing these threats, and instead of going, it's nothing, they're going, I'm going to report this, and then it's being addressed. So in that way, and I think that's great. But again, we have to get involved. We have to start speaking up.
This is true, and there is so I'm glad you brought that up. There is a list of incidents that have been stopped. So I know people are out there doing it, and they're doing the right things. Two things I want to make sure that our audience knows. One is Gene was invited to be on GMA, and because of his work. So we're talking to an expert. We're talking to somebody who's out there in the field and doing it. The other thing is that it is between the black and the white. This is not a divisive conversation. It's real. The demographics tell us what is going on. Now, what's happening, I think, is that I think that the bullying happens in multiple areas. I know somebody who was bullied by children. You're like, how could you be bullied by children? This is how. The kids didn't want to spit out their gum. There was no gum allowed in that specific classroom. Please spit your gum out in the trash. These two little girls did not want to spit their gum out and refused. And every time the teacher would call them to the front of the thing to force them to spit their gum out, there was something that would happen thereafter. And then one day she had set the conversation, whatever exchange happened, she was like, I don't understand why you won't you just need to spit out the gum. This is the rules. They're like, every time you bring us up here and you embarrass us, we will make your life harder. And if you continue to do this, we will tell our parents and the principal that you attempted to have sex with us. And the second child said, and I'll tell them I watched. And then we'll see where you are. So when the teacher went and had a conversation, hey, principal, I have this issue. They bring the families and they're like, you shouldn't be singling out our children. If they want to chew gum, they should chew gum. And we all got to go to a job, right? You can't go to job at 8:05 when they want you there at 8 o'clock. So the rules are the rules that are the rules. It doesn't matter what you think. The rules are whoever leads that room and space. Okay, come back to the story. The parents did not help. They hurt the situation. That teacher of 30 plus years retired. She quit early. Why? Because the school did not protect her, and the children were about to send her through a legal battle that she would have eventually won, but would have lost at the same time. So there was no winning in that situation. Bullying happens because the children are watching whomever they are with, and they are exercising their right to force their way into the space that they want, right? So my thing is that there's no protection for the teachers, and situations like that could have turned violent. Had that teacher said, I'm not going to let you run me out of my classroom, and I'm not going to let you run my classroom. The next incident could have been, this teacher is really getting on my nerves and making my life harder. And it could have been a gun involved in a situation, because now it's irritating. Now, every time I come here, I got this pit in my throat and a hole in my stomach, and I'm always churning because I don't want to go see this teacher. But if she wasn't here anymore, then we won't have that. Because remember, there was a little 7-year-old who shot his teacher, not other students. So there is something with the leadership and the students that's going on. So I just want people to understand, you look for those signs, and the community sees them early on. We all see them. Children who become withdrawn, choosing not to engage with other people, having a really hard time in things and stuff like that. Those are signs. But then the other side of that pendulum is that they are more aggressive and they speak differently, and they're angry all the time, and you can't console them. So you have both sides of that. So where do the signs pick up? Oh, and the fact of the matter is that in that situation I just talked about, the adult in the room ignored it because of exactly what I said. Those are children. What can children do? Children can do a lot. And that's where the problem is. And the precedence has been changed because now parents are going to jail. So I warned against this a while ago, because if you don't hurry up and get this stuff under control, somebody is going to put the parents on the line too. And Michigan was the first group, the first parents who got convicted and currently serving time alongside their child. But now you have a grandfather who is now being pulled into that same thing because he gave the gun, because they look at it as, well, if the school's not going to do anything. I don't know what this person was saying. Okay. I don't know these people. But in my mind, I have been around people who say, well, and I've done it too. If the school won't do it, then I'll take it in my own hands. And for me, I put my child in martial arts so that they can learn how to hold their own space and make sure to keep people at the distance they want them to be at. But other people may say, just beat them up and keep doing it until, right? Or these other violent things. And I think that's why we're down this pathway of parents giving those guns and things like that to their children and not truly explaining the consequences and the expectation of using that tool. So can you please share a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to say here. So yeah, I no. It's and I was also reading some of the comments. So I was listening and reading. It's a lot of really good, of good information here. So yeah, I think that we get into a point that we really have to understand that these kids, if their parents aren't supporting them in a healthy way, if they're not doing what they should be doing for them, in other words, if they come to them with a problem and they're not addressing it, that's one thing. But if they're being told there's a problem with their kid and it's not being addressed, they're downplaying it. That's the other side of it. There's so many things like this conversation is because my mind starts spinning, because to me the solution is easy but complicated at the same time. It's easy because we have to take our emotion out for a minute. We have to step back and say, all right, we have a problem. And what are the issues? What can we look for? And like we talked about the race of the child, okay, we know that's a factor. We have to pay attention to that.
Right.
We don't have to make this a race argument. It's not a race argument. Take the emotions out of this. Let's look at just logically, what do we have going on here and how do we address this? And when a parent is approached by a school and they said, your son's acting a certain way, and they don't really address it, and they just say, well, not my kid, and they buy him a gun, or they do, and again, I love guns. I'm pro gun, but I'm also about being responsible with them and teaching children that, not a toy. This is something that is very serious. It's a fun sport. It's a great thing for protection, but it's not something that you use to take out your violence. And I think you're talking about martial arts, which I'll tell you is one of the most important things for teaching children discipline and control of their emotions is getting involved in martial arts. I don't care what version you want to go with. They're all about that discipline and understanding, controlling your emotions. I look at a lot of people that I know that are truly some of the people that can create the most violence that I know, law enforcement, special forces, things like that. These are truly some of the most violent people that when they have to be, they can do it. And when you talk to them, they're the most gentle, kind, humble people. And that's because they understand that dynamic. And that's what, learning this early on as a kid, that's why I'm so glad you mentioned martial arts, because that is something that is such a great thing to teach a child, how to control their emotions, how to stay calm under pressure, how to not let somebody get to you. Like it's so impactful. And at an early age, it really can make all the difference. So I think it's a great thing. I really do.
And it was very helpful. I think he was able to utilize the skills, the tools that they gave him to stop people from bullying him any longer, because he was having a really hard time. And I'm gonna tell you, right after he started and everything, they were doing the same things they were doing before. And I remember the story because he said, because the school called and they were like, he just kicked in the bathroom door of for the students. But those students were then, dealt with, because they took his lunch and then took off running into the bathroom thinking he wasn't going to do anything, because normally he would not have, right? But this
Hmm.
time he was like, no, that's mine. You need to give it back. And he stood up for himself, and that gave him the ability to do that. And even being on the spectrum, he was able to understand that. So for those families who have children who are dealing with some type of emotional challenges or things like that, if they're on a 504 or an IEP of any kind, martial arts is not a bad place for them to be, because they do, if you find the right dojo, they will actually provide the support for whatever level that they're on. And it was extremely helpful, and it's helped him in his adult life too. So it does work. I think that parents, I think we're so busy most of the time, and because we're so busy, we overschedule our children so that they're so busy that they can't, they're passing themselves in the hallway. If we can stop doing a little bit of that and start sitting down and asking for the high and the low of the day, and then watching the body language of a child when they talk about certain people, right? So
Hmm.
I could always tell when my daughter was having a hard time with one of her friends, because her body language would scream it. It was something about how she moved. It was something about her face and whatever. It gives you signs as to something's happening there. You don't have to be overly involved in your child's day or life, but you should provide a lifeline of support and safety. And if you are not the safe space for them to talk to, you want to provide them, tell them, encourage them to go and find somebody that they can talk to and put them in therapy, right? Hey,
Hmm.
come on.
Yeah.
But, so because the thing about it is we all need somebody that we can turn to and say, this just sucks, and not have a response.
Yes. Yeah. It's you were talking, and I was thinking about how we were as a kid. That was a dinner table conversation, and the question is, how often do parents sit down and have dinner with their families? Is it a quick meal? Is it you just because everyone's working and you got, like you said, you're overbooked on all these things? They got sports, like there's no time,
Yep.
and there's no connection, to the family. And again, these kids are feeling isolated by being bullied as it is, because they think they're the only ones being bullied. They're being isolated at home because they're not getting that attention from their parents or their siblings. you know um it's sad. It's like I said, it comes back again. It comes back to that whole morality, the
Right.
whole concept of family and community is just broken down so much that it's hard to patch it all back together again. But it starts with every single person, you starting to do the one thing that you think is right, and getting involved is so important. It really is. It's just unfortunate that um, we have a situation, where families have to work so much, and
Yeah.
that kids don't have that opportunity to connect like they should. And again, I think social media really just exasperates the whole bullying issue, because it just, when one person it's that mob mentality that when one person makes a comment, then everyone starts making that comment because they want to see who can be funnier in their mind, what they think is funny, when it's being cruel and mean, and it's just destroying, kids' sense of self or
Right.
self-worth, and it breaks them down even more. And until we can start getting these children to realize that, social media is not real. It's a
My
it's
mom had to remind me of that.
people aren't really as happy as they seem on social media. There's a lot going on in everyone's life, and I think that, as you get older, you realize these things, and these kids don't understand that yet. They don't realize what's really happening in the world, but having that conversation, for me, it was at the dinner table. It was sitting down. How was your day? What happened? And we would talk, and my parents would pick up on things. They would pick up on it. They would know if something happened. They'd ask me more about it, and it never really seemed to be that big a deal. And there's a lot I didn't tell them, but I still had an out. I knew that I always could. I had that opportunity. I had the outlet where I could talk to my parents. Um, but I know that not everyone has that opportunity, and so where else can they go to? Well, that's when the teachers come in.
Yep.
When you say, well, I can go to my teacher, but if the teacher is not able to support, and this is where that this multiple breakdown of things, you know. And it used to be, hey, if you need help, go to a police officer, and you go to a police officer, and they a lot of times now police officers can't help you. They can't do the things they used to be able to do. And I'm not talking about arrest. I'm talking about actually helping in a way that was meaningful. Like when I started in law enforcement, the first thing they taught me was that the arrest is the last step. That's the last thing you can help. There's so many things you can do to help someone or resolve a problem before an arrest is made. That's almost gone out the window now, because it's if officers don't make an arrest, they're opening themselves up to liability. And so there's some issues there, but that's a whole nother conversation. But that's where all these little breakdowns are starting to happen. And where do these kids go? They've got nothing else to go to, and that's where these problems start to occur. They just
Right.
they grow so quickly.
And everyone's so busy, so they don't even think about it. So
Yeah.
we're going to address a couple of the things in the audience. So Christine has given you kudos, definitely, because we're re-educating, for this school shooting, for school shootings and things like that. And I was raised in a multi-generational home. So I have talking about helicopter parenting. So we had all kinds of things going on in there, but a lot of families don't have that so much anymore.
Yeah.
And so that's the village, right? So we have to expand that village outward. But one of the things about the race conversation, again, this is not meant to be divisive. It's just information. The point is that when we look at the police in the schools, first of all, police officers have to be in the schools, because over time it was more important for them to be on the premises to kind of help to break up some of the situations that were happening before they escalated. So it's a way to de-escalate. However, they brought their street training into the school and behaved like that towards children. And I think this is where the conversation is coming, this statement is coming from, because they don't concentrate on de-escalating. They concentrate on who cannot prosecute. And whereas you said it used to be the final step is arrest, we're looking more like we'll put them in cuffs first and then we'll investigate, and then we'll determine whether we'll continue on to the arrest, which is harmful in schools and for the students. Because again, if we go to his other comment where he says children, their brains don't fully develop until 25. So why are we putting these young people under the age of 18 in certain situations to make them feel like more afraid of the police presence, instead of saying, hey, I need help because Jeff over here just keeps on beating on me. Okay. I don't know what happened to you, Gene, but you lost your sound.
How about now?
Okay, good.
Sorry, my earbuds died on me, and I had to set the other speaker up.
I'm good.
Technology. So school resource officers, not officers that are just placed into a school. It's actually a certification that they get, and it isn't about just making an arrest and identifying and persecuting. It's not about that. When someone is trained to be a school resource officer, they are trained to help children. And it's not about the arrest. The arrest is always that when things get to such a bad degree, that's when they'll take the arrest. But they're there to be a support for the children. And I've seen, I can't tell you the amount of people that I know that are school resource officers, and I watch them interact with these kids. I watch these kids run up to them and hug them. And these kids, and I'm not talking about elementary. I'm talking about high school. Cool. I'm talking about people who are these officers that are trained on how to work within a school environment, understanding that they are law enforcement, but they're the connection, they're that resource, which is why it's resource officer. They're a resource to the child and to the school to help fill that gap of where these kids can go to. And some of these SROs are just it's like when you have a really good teacher. Like if I asked you who your favorite teacher was, you probably could think of a couple that you're like, oh my God, they were such a great influence on me. They were just a great. It's the same thing with the school resource officer. We have to build that. So I understand what he was saying about the one side of it, but the reality is that if it's done correctly, where they go through a school resource officer training, which is it's a long course, it's a couple of week long, that teaches you how to balance the law enforcement, but with the aspect of also that resourceful helping when these kids don't know where to go to, that they've got somebody they can go to. So it's a very valuable resource. It really is important.
It could be. Okay. So for my situation, my son was seen more as a threat than as the perpetrator versus the victim. He was the victim, and that's why I asked that question. So instead of them saying, hey, he may have been the one that he may have been the victim we need to have a conversation about, they approach him as if he was the aggressor. And that has actually caused problems, especially because him being on the spectrum, that is going to be an issue. So I just think that there needs to be a little bit more training. But you're right, it's going to be depending on where they are. So this brings me to this other thing. So I was on CNN because I do the research before I come on here, and it shows that there are 5 states who since 2008 have not had any school shootings.
Okay.
What are those 5 states doing that the rest of the country can learn from? They are Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, North Carolina, Maryland, and Delaware.
Don't have an answer. I don't have an answer for you. Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It's funny because you took it a different way. Where you're like, I looked up the states and I'm like, that have the most. I know California, Texas, Florida. I'm like, ooh, this will be interesting. So I love that you did that because that's. And this is it's funny as much as I dive into this research and I do the research, as much as I know about it, I love that you pose that of, well, what are we not looking at? Because that's what I always try to do is, what are we missing? Where's that? And to look at it from the opposite side of, instead of going, well, why is it happening here? Looking at why is it not happening there is another great question. And I don't have an answer for you. I don't have an answer for you, but that's definitely something that I think that should be looked into.
Yep. I think that if they have figured out how to do that, then why are we not able to do that? Why are we not able to do the rest of that? Because there is no financial benefit to either side when a child dies. Uvalde, that's why I said I do believe this was the pivot point. All these children were dying over time, but when you go in and you wipe out greater than 20 people in one sitting, that school went down. They took it down. They built in a different school now. Nobody will ever go back to that grounds. Nobody will ever be reminded of what happened there, right? And then a lot of things got changed in that moment, like in that time period. And just keep in mind, my app can solve some of these problems. A lot of what's going on in these schools, if they invited KIX to be a partner in the schools, in the school systems, it would help the school from not being inundated by phone calls, unnecessary phone calls, not having the wrong parents show up at your school, and being able to communicate effectively to all of your parents, and they will receive the message that says your child is safe. Please do not bog down their phones and stay off of the school premises until this is settled. And then all the rest of the parents who need to be present, they can be notified and be brought in. And that's an easier way to do it. So our system does more than just arrival and dismissal. It does a few other things that can help the families. And then you help to prevent this from happening. But it's just unfortunate. It has to take so many people in so many places in one concentrated area in order for it to be better. Because Sandy Hook will all remember, because they now have a Sandy Hook promise, because that should have never happened. These are definite pivot points where things definitely changed. So we just have to be more diligent about getting involved in our children's lives and stop being so busy to talk to them.
Yeah, it's and all of them should never. None of these should ever happen. We never should have any of these shootings. There's no reason for it to ever have happened. We miss all these opportunities, and you're right. I think that everyone is too busy. We're worried about getting involved. We'd rather just stay out of it, and we can't live like that. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about how they had an extended family that helped them raise their child because they weren't able to be there all the time. They're working. It was a single mother. She's working all the time. She's not able to do everything, and she's got her cousins. They're all closely related, and they all have to raise that child. Not everyone has that. Like I said, a lot of single parents, I think, are dealing with some of these issues, but we also have opportunities with family and friends to get involved. And I think that a lot of people want to help. They want to help their friends out with their kids. I know a lot of my friends who have kids, their kids come to me and they're I consider them my family. They're no relation, but they're my family. They're going to be, these are the people that are going to be running the country, running our society, being in public. We need to take care of them too. Just because they're not blood related doesn't mean that you can't have an impact on them. And I think that's a responsibility that we all have to start taking. And again, if we're busy, that's fine if we have to, but you can always make time. That's the one thing that you'll never get back. You're never going to get back these moments with your kids, and if things go bad and you end up losing your child because of one of these shootings.
Yep.
You know, you missed opportunities, and it's sad. Life doesn't have to be that way. We need to start getting involved. We need to start caring about each other, and instead of just ourselves.
Yeah, because it's not about us anymore anyway. So we're living our lives, and we're already established and on the trajectory we're going to go, and we're going to land somewhere in our stars. But what's coming up behind us needs additional support to get launched into the trajectory that they're supposed to go into.
Yeah.
And we can't do that if we have kids who are not being cared for. So what does the conversation look like when your child comes to you and says, this person keeps hitting me? I'll tell you my story. All right. So my daughter, because I'm going to tell you, anybody who knows me knows that there's certain things we just don't play with, and it's just not going to work out. So I got a phone call one day, and I worked an hour and a half away from where my kids went to high school. So it takes me to get to work a period of time. It takes me an additional 20 minutes to get down to them. It takes me about an hour to get to that job. And I remember receiving a phone call that said my daughter was being bullied, but not just bullied. She was being hit by a boy in a hallway. And this boy, I didn't get all the whole entire story, but I was like, hey, we need to figure this out. Because that one specifically, because I got two, one is quiet. She doesn't bother anybody. She knows what is expected of her. She does what is expected of her. She lives her life and learns, and does her thing. But this child wanted something from her, and she said no. And he wasn't willing to accept no as an answer. So he followed her to her classroom. And at the time, I didn't know what he was hitting her with, but he was literally following her through the classroom, just hitting her, bop, 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 bop in the head. Just kept going all the way to her classroom. So I call and I say, hey, I need to speak to my kid. And they said, nope, we can't. Nope, she's in class, so you can't talk to her. And I said, oh, I know she's in class, but I need you to pull her out and put her on this phone. And the reason why I did that is because if I make it to the school, I'm bringing a lawyer and an officer. You do not want that. I'm telling you. So I was like, I told her, I says, you have two options. You can find my kid and put him on the phone, or I make it down there. And when I make it down there, that's not going to be pleasant for anyone. So they passed me to the AP. He said, can you please explain to me? I said, if I knew, I would explain it to you, but I do not know. So you need to bring that kid down. This is a little bit of what I know, but I need to understand what's happening at your school. So he said, I'll give you a call right back. He brings her in and she explains what happens. And yes, they caught it on camera. I was asking questions. And at some point in time in the conversation, the AP was like, hang on 1 second. Let me ask some questions now. Right. So he started asking questions. They were more like pinpointing exactly where this is happening. He went and found the video. Then he went and found the person. And he was like, he's talked to me. He says, you will not have to worry about this ever again. So he put a stop to it. It's very, very possible. Now, would my child go back and shoot up the school? Nope. She doesn't have that type of personality. But if that child was someone else, that could be that moment where they make a decision that no one's listening to me and nobody wants to do anything for me. And so she was literally cowering down. She was crying. She was upset, and she didn't know what way to go. If that's what you're breeding in your schools, that's why we're having the problems that we're having, and we need to put a stop to it. And that's why I say it's all of us that are responsible for this, not just one.
Yeah. And that's the perfect example of how this all happens. And again, it's not about blaming the school. It's not about blaming law enforcement, not about blaming parents. It's the mistakes that are made across all those levels that build up to where this child has no ability to get that release, to get that I'm cared for, people are listening to me, I have value, all those things, and it destroys their self-worth. They get angry, they feel like the world's out to get them, and they're going to get their retribution, and then they go right up that pathway, and then here we are with a shooting. So it again, it doesn't have to be a shooting, it could be a knife. We've got knife attacks too.
Yep.
We have to start getting involved and taking it seriously. It seems like a small thing. Oh, it's just bullying. And that's such a horrible attitude.
Yeah.
Because it's there's books about it. It's the small things. Yeah, it is the small things that make the big things. That's why we have to focus on these small things. Focus on when they're small. The whole idea is if it's small, it's manageable. But when it gets big, and now we've got a kid that's shooting up a school, well, we're managing what? How to reunify parents with their kids that are safe, and what do we do with the victims, and we've missed that huge opportunity to address something that probably could have been addressed very early on and been prevented.
Right. I agree. And you're absolutely correct. We have control over this. Don't take all of the control out of the child's hands. They are dealing with the firsthand. And by the way, I was told that when you're out of high school, the bullying will stop. Another lie. It's not true. It goes into the workplace, because the reason why I am no longer in the workplace is because of bullying. I was bullied consistently for such a long period of time, and it became so unmanageable that when I went and sought help, the people who were there to help me told me that I had no basis. But meanwhile, they also said in that same breath, they are doing things that are inappropriate, but we will not help you. If those are the messaging we're receiving, then that's what our children are. If we're receiving that as an adult, are we passing that message to our children and therefore giving them no option but to do harm to others? That's what we really need to be mindful of. So as we go ahead and wrap up, I want to give you an opportunity to say some final words and let people know how to find you, what you got going on, and let people connect to you.
Okay. Well, I'm all over LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. My whole thought on all this is what our big focus on right now is teaching people how to identify these threats before they become a violent incident. And there's so much that can be done. Threat assessments are so important. Understanding threat indicators are so important. And if we can get that word out and start teaching people how to do that, I think that 20% or so reduction that we've seen in the last couple of years will go even farther. And again, there's always going to be crime. There's always going to be bad things that happen, but we can control the amount of it. We really can. There's a lot. One person can make a huge difference. That one person that can step up and say, "Hey, this kid needs help," and step in and do something. That one person could solve a whole huge loss for a community. Because it's not just the parents when this hits your community, it destroys your community. Assault in Parkland, it doesn't have to happen, and we really can make a big difference if we start learning how to do it.
I agree. So thank you very much. Oh, what the heck? I'm over here pushing buttons and then pushing all the wrong buttons, I think. So we're just going to keep on trying to not push the buttons. I don't know. I'm going to have one of those days. Okay. So as always, I want to make sure that we know we love our teachers, regardless of what you say. So we love you, teachers, because we know that you're doing something that we may not be able to do. We appreciate and love and respect the job you're doing. We believe you need support and help. So we're here to help you with that. We bring you people on a regular basis that provide you answers to some of your pressing questions that maybe you don't even know you have. But in this situation, we're trying to help preserve your life and theirs too. So we want to let you know we love you. We want to put a special thanks out there for our friends at Helpopedia. Keep in mind, this is nothing but help for you, your family, and your community. If you're looking for some support and help, make sure that you go ahead and scan that QR code for Helpopedia. And as always, just keep in mind, words are power. Please remember to use them wisely. See you next time. Thank you for your time today. We appreciate the support and look forward to you visiting us again next week. Same time, same place. Until then, words are power. Please remember to use them wisely. If you have an interest or like to be on our live show, please let us know and send us a direct message.